So if you remember my first video about the Fuji X100VI, well, after a few thousands of images shot with this camera, I may have to eat a lot of the words that I said in that video. So at a glance, this camera has surprised me and has surprised me by far versus the version 5. So in this video, I'm gonna be covering my findings and why I think the Fuji X100VI is a much superior camera than the Mark V and perhaps the best camera of its kind right now. Let's go. Now, the first topic that I want to discuss is going to be the sensor. And in my prior video, we were discussing that no one needs more than 26, 24 megapixel for most average, photography needs, most specifically if your content is going to end up in social media. But I think that with this camera having a 40 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor, right now this camera can be taken for professional work. Not that you couldn't take obviously the Fuji X100 Mark V, but the fact that we have some other features that are gonna be talking in just a moment, adding to the enhanced image quality. Having 40 megapixels is gonna allow you to push your recomposing in post even further. And you're gonna notice this most specifically if you are going to decide to print your work in larger format. This is where you're gonna be taking advantage of almost double the resolution with this version. I've done it before with the Fuji X100 Mark V, and sometimes if you push your file too much, you may start seeing some of the lines or edges a little bit blurrier or jagged. Now with 40 megapixel, you are gonna be able to push them even further. Now where you're also gonna be benefiting from this, specifically if you like to shoot in JPEG, I've been using the digital teleconverter that we have right here. Now we have this feature also in the Mark V version, but right now because we have the additional megapixel resolution, it is something that I'm using more often than I would have thought. Now, the digital teleconverter is gonna give you an in-camera cropping equivalent to a 50 or 70 millimeters. And the camera, or at least this one, can configure the ring. So the moment you move the ring, you are going to be toggling through the 50 and the 7 millimeters. But I've been bumping the ring so often that I deconfigure that from here, and now I have a button assigned in the back just to do that. So it's actually really useful because added to the fact that we have film simulations, including the brand new Reala Ace that made its debut in the GFX 100 II, which is now my favorite film simulation. You can pretty much shoot JPEG or HEIT files, download those files, crop to either 50 or 70 millimeters and go straight to print. And the results are really amazing. I really like that fast workflow that this camera allows you. I also want to talk about noise performance because when I've heard that I was going to be dealing with 40 megapixels versus 26, I was a little bit afraid that the low light capabilities of this camera or the noise performance was going to be downgraded from the prior version. But to my surprise, the noise performance of this camera, I have to say that it is either equal or even better in some situations. One thing for sure, if you can see in this image right here, you still get a very crisp image even in lower light situations. And added to the fact that this camera is going to have IBIS, we're going to be discussing that in just a moment, this camera is going to be a low light performer, way better than the prior version. Now, with this camera, the autofocus performance is going to be leap forward in comparison to the Fuji X100 Mark V. First of all, we are going to have the subject detection that works really good. You're going to be able to track animals, objects, and all that stuff. But where this camera is going to excel, in my opinion, is going to be in the eye autofocus compared to prior version. Now, it is very responsive. Not only that, it is very responsive also in low light situations, which is an area where I felt that the Fuji X100 Mark V struggle in lower light situations. This one, as long as you are within reasonable distance with your subject, and I have to remark this because if the subject is further away, you're not gonna get the same detection capability that, for example, I get with my Sony camera. So the subject is gonna have to be within reasonable distance. Now, that capability of autofocus is also going to be translated to video, which is an area where the Fuji X100 Mark V lacked, in my opinion. So The Fuji X100VI was a great photo camera, not as much as a video camera. So when it comes to post-production, color grading, you were very limited, and actually I did a video last year. Now fast forward 2024, Fuji gave us this camera with amazing video specs, but at a glance we have 4K video up to 60p in 10-bit 422 and also 6.2K in 10-bit 422 at 30p. So when it comes to video, added to the fact that we have 10-bit capability 422 and the IBIS, this camera can now be considered as a legit hybrid shooting unit for a lot of people that all they need is a 35mm and something to capture some nice video. And we gotta talk about IBIS. Now the Fuji X100VI, I never kind of like felt that I needed IBIS. I always felt that the camera was good enough for photo, but being able to shoot a super low shutter speed with this camera in photo did allow me to capture images that I would have never been able to capture before with the Fuji X100VI unless the camera was with a tripod. So when it comes to handheld shooting photos, you are gonna obtain lower light performance with this camera. And when it comes to video, you are going to get very usable handheld video with this camera. Now, it's not gonna be a camera that you are gonna be able to walk and still get like gimbal light performance. It's gonna be bumpy, the IBIS, for that type of video. But for the occasional panning, and shooting, hand holding, this camera is gonna perform extremely well. I also wanna talk about these two accessories because in all the videos that I've done of the Mark V and the last one of the Mark VI, people ask me, what is that? So what I have right here is a thumb grip by this company, I believe it's called LensMate. And this thumb grip actually has a hinge. So it allows you to clear away from this dial right here and have it configured to the shutter speed, and also gives you better access to the top dial right over here. So I've tried some of the other thumb grips and I always feel that they're a little bit on the way, and this one to me is just feels perfect and it's also fidgety, so I like it a lot. Now the second product that I'm gonna recommend is some sort of lens hood, but most specifically one that can actually protect the lens from the elements. As you can see, this one right here has a built-in UV filter, and this UV filter can be removed if you don't like it, but the very first Fuji X100VI that I got, which it was also in silver and it got stolen, actually got dust in the sensor, and I live here on the beach. Every time I would shoot something with a bright sky, I would see all the specks on the sky, and then having to clone, 1,000 images, it was a pain in the butt. So for that reason alone, when I got my second version, which was the black one, I put one of those guys and never had an issue at all. It's also gonna add, better weather sealing to this camera, and it's something that I will strongly recommend you do because dealing with cleaning the sensor, that's gonna mean that you're gonna have to part ways with your camera to Fuji. So if you have seen my video of the first look of the Fuji X100 Mark VI, one of the things that I mentioned was the lens that I felt that it was a little bit soft when zooming in too much or cropping aggressively. And to be honest with you, that is something that doesn't bother me at all, and I'm not gonna say that this lens is bad, but what I wish Fuji would have done with this lens, that they would have upgraded this lens to resolve the higher megapixel. Again, it's not a big deal, you have to zoom or crop to really see what I'm talking about, and in most cases, it's not gonna be a different for a lot of people. Now, this one is going to be more of a wish list. Now, one is gonna be the screen. I love the screen, I love the tilt screen, but I shoot a lot in portrait mode, and I would have loved for this camera to have the tilt in portrait mode as well for those lower angles, and bending over this times, guys, hurts. So that would have been something that I would have loved in this camera. Not a deal breaker, of course. Now the other thing that I would have wished they also upgraded was tactile buttons on the back of the camera, because these buttons are hard to feel. And a lot of the times if you're using the EVF or optical viewfinder, they're hard to find, and sometimes, I have to go and take a look at the camera. For example, with my Leica M11, I can find all the buttons by simply touching, the surface of the button and finding them right away. But once again, I love the fact that Fuji kept the same ergonomic. I think that they have nailed it with the Mark V. I don't see the need for a deeper grip, and this camera is really comfortable. So in my last video, I was a little bit reluctant to suggest a camera, with just a couple of days of use, but after shooting a lot of videos and shooting a lot of photos, thousands of photos with this camera, it is safe to say that I can tell you that if you have the money, you are gonna be very pleased with this little guy. Specifically, if you're looking for something compact 35mm, something that's gonna give you great image quality in photo and also very decent video specs. Something that I couldn't say about the Fuji X100 Mark V. This camera is gonna sit as the king of its kind, you know, a camera with a built-in lens. I love the fact that it's a 35 rather than the 28. You know, APS-C sensor, great video specs. The higher megapixel resolution is going to be a plus for me. And to be honest with you, the ergonomics and the style of this camera actually goes really well with my Leica M11, and this is the kit that I've been rocking every day. Usually a 75 or 50 in this camera, although I have a 35 right now. Now, where this camera sees more time with me is in lower light situations or at night. And if I'm gonna go out at night, the Leica M11 is gonna stay home, and this one is gonna go out with me, specifically if I'm doing things with the family, with friends and stuff like that. The flash, you know, it's a really good camera, really fun camera to shoot specifically for gathering parties and everyday photography. So guys, this one is gonna be the end of the video. Drop your comments down below if you have any comments. If you have shot with the camera, let me know if you're still waiting for yours. Be patient. This camera is going to be worth the wait. And also be in the lookout for my new episode about the video specs and video samples of the Fuji X100 Mark VI. See you in the next video.